With that, I'm really excited to have Kara joining us today to talk about how to build teams from scratch. Kara and I met here in Vancouver when I was a product leader, and Kara was also leading teams in lots of different product organizations. She's a product operations and technology professional, lots of different experience, everything from international development to nonprofit to political campaigns to growth stage startups. She is utterly fantastic. I think you're really going to enjoy her session and conversation today. A lot of different experience in bringing new products to market, building onboarding workflows, improving business processes. She's in her current role as a senior product manager for Zip. She leads the organization's product strategy for their internal tools, customer success and payments teams in the US, Canada, Mexico, and the UK. And yeah, really excited to have you joining us. And I will, with that, pass over to Kara to share screen and we'll get things started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Scott. I appreciate it. I'm really excited to get started and looking forward to talking to everyone today. My name is Kara Zucker. I'm a senior product manager at Zip, which is a buy now, pay later solution similar to Affirm, Klarna, Afterpay. And I oversee payments, internal tools, and customer success, but have had a long career in startups and working in tech and really enjoy just getting to know people and understanding their problems and trying to figure out how to fix them. So to get started for today, this is kind of the agenda in terms of the 5 steps that I kind of emphasized. Some of those are really going through what your ultimate goal is and timeline, what that means for your team, your organization, what we're hoping to look at in terms of what you really want to accomplish. And then second is really looking at the lay of the land. What does it look like in terms of the problems that you're facing? What are your big challenges? And based on your goals, what are you trying to accomplish? In terms of the third is really looking at how can you really establish a great team and cultural environment? What's most important to you in terms of making sure it's a very inclusive, supportive, and open environment where people respect one another, they can be creative, they can get excited. And then fourthly is set up processes. So looking at what does it mean in terms of creating efficiencies? If you're an agile organization, more waterfall, what are the things that you do every day, like a stand-up? Or what are things that you do on a weekly basis as a team? What kind of structure and framework does it mean? Just like you would to have coffee or breakfast in the morning or decompression drink at the end of the day or whatever works for you. What is that kind of set of standard for your team so something's consistent? And then lastly, looking at the 4 steps and realizing, okay, what needs to be tweaked and changed, what needs to be improved, and how can we get better? So step 1. Looking at your actual ultimate goal. So I'm curious from anyone how many people actually have OKRs from your teams. How many folks are curious in terms of what it means in terms of an OKR? If anyone minds explaining what an OKR is, I'd love to hear that. If you know, that would be awesome. Nice. Objection, key results. Perfect. That's exactly right. So looking at what it means actually in terms of the results you want to accomplish, what does it look like in terms of those key results, those metrics in terms of how can we move the line in certain areas or gain more money or bring on more users or establish more partners that we're working with, whatever works for your organization, and what is kind of your North Star essentially, and how do you plan on accomplishing them? If you haven't read Measure What Matters, I highly recommend it if you're not super familiar with OKRs or you just want to improve the OKRs that you have for your team or your company. It's a great resource. So to start, some people who might be having OKRs, but maybe they're not working as well, could be a variety of these things. Now, I know this is a lot of text on one slide, but just to kick us off in terms of you're not really starting from company OKRs, you're looking at it in terms of, okay, what does my team want to accomplish, which is not really tying to exactly what the large organization. You have one team, maybe there are multiple teams in terms of how that kind of funnels up to a larger company perspective, but what does that look like instead of connecting just what your team can accomplish, but for the overall company, and then you're meeting those same goals. Looking at exactly, which KPIs are most important. So really looking at, okay, let's look at 10 different ones versus just 2 or 3, kind of overwhelming in terms of what's really going to be the focus for the team and how you can be successful. As maybe some of us know, too many metrics is really overwhelming and kind of dilutes the actual goal of the company. It's pretty tough in terms of what you're actually going to accomplish in the future. And then third, the team didn't really measure those KPIs, whether you set them, but no one actually went back and revisit them. I'm curious if this has happened to anyone before. Definitely interested to see. And then also on top of that, there's just way too much manual work to actually put this. This is a big problem for my team right now. You don't have an automated dashboard. You don't have a way to really find out that information easily. It's not automated. You can't get it in an email, or it's not updated consistently in order to give you accurate data. And then lastly, underestimating the actual effort to introduce OKRs. It's really new, and it's definitely something that can be overwhelming if someone doesn't understand exactly what it means, what's involved, and how to actually create great OKRs. But yeah. Step 2 is looking at the lay of the land. So in terms of what it means to kind of see what our product look like, what we can actually accomplish, what is the current status quo. So for example, if you're looking at, okay, I have a product that's a mobile app, I have 10,000 users, I get 1,000 users per month. Am I trying to boost that by 50%? Am I trying to boost that by 10%? How do I accomplish that? How can I get more users? What does that look like? Is this a key problem? Do I need to re-engage with the 10,000 users that I have to make sure that they're more active or meeting the features that they need? So really looking kind of to those OKRs and goals of like, what are you trying to accomplish? What's the current status quo? And then how do we get there? What does that, essential roadmap look like? Awesome. Second in the way of doing this is really creating kind of a census or an audit. Not sure how many people have any accounting background in the room, but just kind of curious in terms of what it looks like of like the current status for your product. Who are the people that are going to be most influential in terms of key stakeholders? I don't know if you report to a director of product or a chief product officer. Maybe you report to the CEO if you're a smaller startup. Who are the people who are most interested? What are they most concerned about? What are their worries? What keeps them up at night? What do they need to accomplish in order to meet their investors' needs? Or what would really define the product in terms of being successful? So looking at it from not only a cost benefit analysis, are there things that can be impactful to the company? Are there things that can be most impactful to your team? How do you kind of weigh those needs? And then definitely, and probably one of the most important things is looking at user research. What are people saying about your product? What do they want more of? What's a key pain point? What's taking them a long time to do in order to accomplish that maybe could be easier for them? There's a lot of different ways of looking at this. Some people in product refer this as a one-pager or sometimes like a PRD, but it's really looking at, this is the status of the product, this is where we want to go, and these are the problems we're facing. It gives you a chance to kind of just step back and look big picture of what's most important, and are we putting our effort in areas that maybe aren't needed. For 3, this kind of goes into exactly what it means to create a team environment. I was hoping to see a little bit more in the chat. Looks like it's now available for everyone, which is awesome. Thank you. I'm curious, what do you think that really creates a great team or culture? Please add in the chat. I'm curious because everyone will benefit in terms of what one person says versus another. So what to you, or if it's not your team currently, maybe what has a team you've worked on in the past that has made it successful? Trust, totally agree. If you can't trust someone, you can't work with them. Being able to share a shared goal, 100%. Yeah, definitely trust is one of them. If you can't trust someone, how can you work with them and really make sure that you'll be able to accomplish things together? Definitely clarity on a lot of goals and objectives. Awesome. Getting feedback, the mutual respect. Definitely. Sometimes I say I don't really need to be liked by people, but I do need people to respect my decisions at a minimum. Comfort and safety to raise disagreements. Totally agree with that. Making sure that, this didn't work out well. Why? How can we get through that and make sure it doesn't happen again? Working agreements. Something we do on my team is we do like a norming session. Every time a new person joins, we go through and we define what our responsibilities are as a product manager, as an engineering manager, as a developer, as a senior developer, et cetera. And then we reciprocate what are our expectations for other people on our team. And we list them out. And it's a fairly lengthy document, but we go through it together. Is there anything that needs to be changed or adjusted? So everyone knows this is the level in terms of expectations. And we know that's what we expect from one another. And when that hasn't happened, we kind of need to regroup, almost like an unwritten contract of, we talked about this, we agreed to this, how can we move forward? Great answers, everyone. So something that I kind of found has been most helpful, and this was kind of talked about in the chat, which is even better, is the idea of confianza. So I spent a few years in Central America with the Peace Corps, and something that was really important in the beginning is really establishing that trust, or in Spanish, confianza, with people that you work with, making sure that they know what you're about, what you're hoping to accomplish, who you are as a person, where you come from, what you're passionate about, what you're excited, and really understanding what those skill sets are and also your limitations. So I'm curious, how have you guys established, trust across your teams, whether it's been through icebreakers or team building activities? I assume a lot of you are remote and have had get to know your coworkers in different ways. Curious to see what has really worked well for you to establish that kind of baseline foundation of trust to be able to work together. Yeah, fun period on Fridays. We do that too. It's nice to just decompress, whether it's trivia or, Jeopardy or something else, like just a nice way to decompress. We have our data team is amazing at Zip, and they come together every Friday and just do something fun. Definitely social shares, each team meeting. That's awesome. Definitely would love to hear more about that, Linda. But yeah, learning, really understanding, what are people's backgrounds? Where do they come from? What are they interested in? What do they want to learn? Where do they want to go? Do they want to go into management? Do they enjoy being, more of an IC and an individual contributor? Do they want to mentor people? If you have a backend engineer that really wants to get more front-end experience, become full stack, acknowledge that, find opportunities for them. So really getting that kind of baseline understanding goes a long, long way. If you don't establish that in the beginning, it's really kind of hard to move forward. So step 4 is going into process. Now, I'm really curious from people who are in the chat, how many of you have ever been in a situation where things were over-processed in any way, to a point where you were maybe duplicating a document that was in a PowerPoint, and then in a spreadsheet, and then in a Word document, and then in an email, and it's all the same information? Not sure if anyone has the examples of this. Yeah, too many fields of Jira for tracking. Don't even get me started. I could talk about Jira as a whole other talk. Anything else? Yeah, just over process, whether it was like from someone from an ops point of view or an executive level, like it's just the struggle is real. So something to keep in mind, like as you go through all these steps of really building, what does it look like from an ultimate goal, really looking at the lay of land, what's the status quo right now, how can you create a better team and culture, and then process. But just being really conscious, especially for products, looking at that's a tough question, Nancy. Definitely happy to answer that later in a little bit, is really looking at, how can we give enough process to be able to be efficient and accomplish a lot of things, but how do we not over process it to a point where you're spending 10, 20% or more of your time really looking at, why are we doing all these excess things? Is it necessary? Different executives requesting different things. It's very frustrating, and communicating that feedback of like, we need to have one central place that we see that information, one source of truth, and we use that. Maybe it's not the best format, but it's better to have something versus multiple iterations of something, because that just leads to error. And lastly, it just kind of ends up doing frustration, wasted time, repetitive tasks. Something that I often go back to when it comes to wasted work, essentially, is how much is this actually costing the team in terms of time, energy, money. I look at every meeting and see, okay, on average, this is how much I think developers are making, and this is how much this meeting is costing. Is this really worth it? Is it really worth to have this expensive meeting and to go over this again? Maybe not. And lastly is iterating, communicating, and analyzing how you can do better. So for this is really tough. I'm curious to hear from people how they have kind of done this in their own teams, how have they kind of reflected back and looked at, okay, what can I improve in terms of the processes that I have in place? Or do we need to have more meetings around cross collaboration across teams, or identifying dependencies? How can we look at in terms of analyzing our KPIs and objectives? what are some things that maybe we shouldn't be measuring or we need to that are new and different and based on a new feature or a new product that we launched that we aren't tracking right now. So kind of just curious if anyone has any examples in terms of how they've kind of looked back and iterated and communicated in terms of making those changes. Short survey. Yeah, definitely a great question. Looking at what people are thinking, even especially anonymous, people are a lot more honest about things that frustrate them or feel like there's a gap between knowledge around areas. Definitely a good suggestion. Yeah, if anyone doesn't do retros or you don't use agile, those are really, really helpful. It's definitely good also just to look at it in terms of, okay, how can we improve? Where are we at? And what's going well, depending on what format you prefer for retros. We use Easy Retro for us. It works well. Gathering at the end of the project and speak up is good. Yeah, what can be improved? Definitely. Like just having that closure on the end of a project, whether it was successful or unsuccessful, or, what are the things that you kind of improved on of who dropped the ball? We had a situation recently where we had a huge launch coming up and it happened to be one person who had to approve one component of it and they were out the day because we ended up getting delayed and pushing back, which was a huge dependency. Definitely didn't think about it, didn't realize it, didn't have a clear out of office plan. So, making sure that you're conscious of some of those things. I'm sure that's happened for some people in the past. Like this only one person can fix it and they're happy to be out or unavailable. Yeah, awesome. Cool. These are great questions. Thank you everyone for adding more. And definitely, yeah, the quick CSATs collection is also really helpful. Not just looking at from like a product team, but like a wider group, like who else has interpretations and feedback of like things that could have gone better. Awesome. Cool. So the way that I kind of look at this in terms of doing like a pulse check, like what's going well, what's not going well, very similar to retros. What can I do in terms of making things easier or more efficient? And then how can I also empower others to do that? Something that I think sometimes doesn't always happen, especially between like product leaders or engineering leaders, is it's not just discussing between the 2 or 3 of you as leaders and as people managers, but it's also involving the team. So being very transparent of like, this did not go well. We did not log this. We did not, accurately measure how much time we dedicated to incidents or bugs or other things that came through. How can we do that better next sprint? And being just very transparent and honest about the faults that did not go well and how use that as a jumping off point to improve. We got feedback recently from some of our junior engineers, which was great to just hear them speak up, who were very junior, like second, third job, not even. They wanted to understand what the process was with sprint planning. Like how did they get assigned tickets that they were assigned? They wanted to be curious about other things they could learn. And it was something that we didn't want to minimize. We wanted to not have too much time, their calendars between meetings, but to hear that feedback, we're like, you're always optional to be invited. This is kind of the path we went to. This is the questions we can answer. We set up a separate meeting just to kind of go through some of those tickets and questions to help add clarity for the reasoning behind it and the importance and the priority. And that helped a lot. And they kind of realized over time that, okay, this is what the process is. I don't really need to attend these meetings anymore, which was great. And then also just sourcing other suggestions from other teams. I mean, it's looking at what's working well for other teams. What's their priorization framework in terms of taking in projects? What has worked well for them in terms of team building? I've had other coworkers who, exclusively use Zoom versus Google Hangouts or things because they have fun avatars and fun backgrounds and different themes. And, every week they have a different, background that's colorful and fun. You get to learn a little bit more about them, which is great. It just makes it a little bit more light and not so intense. Yeah, I totally agree in terms of the Toyota production system, like, what it looks like in terms of what's happening on a day-to-day basis. I work really closely with our customer success team. I'm always blown away by the suggestions that they have, even from product features and suggestions. We have a specific dedicated social team just for customer success. So inquiries that come from Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc., Facebook, TikTok. And it's amazing to me that people reach out and they're like, hey, did you know your competitor offers this? It would be really great if you did that. Or, I use my Starbucks awards. Why don't you offer something like that? Like things that you didn't necessarily think about sometimes come from your own users and from customer success, which is awesome. So just as a recap, just because I wanted to give a lot of time for Q&A, because it seems there was a bunch in the chat, is looking at, what is your ultimate goal? What's your North Star that you want to accomplish? Really scoping out or giving an audit or research of like, what is the lay of land in terms of where we are at now? Where do we want to go? What are the key problems? What are the pain points? What's going well? What are we killing it as? And how can we improve that? And then third, loved all the suggestions on like the great team culture and environment, like building that trust to start is so important. Just like you would with a friend or a partner or kids of like, look, I can trust that I will provide this every day. I will take the trash out once a week, whatever it is, that person has your back. And same thing goes for teams. That someone's going to jump on it. If it's urgent, they will respond to you within 24 hours or whatever set of standards that you've agreed on your team. I mean, like many of you, we have team members in all different time zones, and sometimes someone's going to be able to jump on something on the East Coast faster than I will be able to, and that's okay. Looking at that great set of processes with flexibility, so making sure that feedback loop is constantly open, and looking at how can this be better? What are other teams doing that's maybe better and easier for me? And then lastly is iterating, communicating, evaluating, and this should definitely be done as much as possible, but really at the end of every feature or sprint or however you accomplish it, in terms of like really looking at, okay, what went well, what didn't, what did we kind of drop the ball on, what was missed, and how can we improve, not only for our current processes, but how we establish our goals, how we work together as a team. And yeah, Mansi, like customer success is amazing. There's so many opportunities there in terms of just bringing in feedback that people suggest or frustrations. I mean, I'm always blown away by the steps that a customer took to try to accomplish something that is so intense. It's like, oh my gosh, you really needed to, this was really important to you. And how could I make it easier? So it's not so difficult. So definitely interesting as well. Awesome. Yeah, so I think for me, that's mostly it. Now it's time for questions. So I saw a bunch in the chat in terms of I can just start from the beginning to the end. I don't know, Scott, if you have a particular order, what you prefer.
Yeah, maybe we pull one from the chat that I think will probably get left out because it wasn't in the Q&A, and that was maybe a question here from Anzi is, how do you deal with the stakeholders that hate basic agile processes?
Yeah, so I think I would probably try to understand the root of the problem as to why they hate basic agile. Like, what is their reasoning in terms of being hesitant for it first before pushing something that they already have an aversion to? So if they hate agile, then they need to provide an alternative. Often I talk to my team of like, okay, you have this problem and issue, that's fine, but don't try, unless you are completely out of options, don't bring it to the table unless you have some potential solutions of what it could look like. And then we'll work together to solve those. But if, they're kind of coming with, we hate this, that's not really productive and not helpful for the team from a morale standpoint. So looking at it in terms of, okay, why is this not working? And what do you feel should be working? Give them the opportunity to try that, try to work with them. And then you can kind of take that evidence, be like, okay, this failed because of this, or this, we need to iterate a little bit to kind of come to a compromise where, we at least have retros. Maybe they don't want to call them retros, whatever, but have something to kind of regroup and review back of what worked and what didn't. Okay, then you kind of look at, okay, how do we kind of organize our work? Not in agile, but what is a way to organize it so it's less ad hoc and chaotic? So understanding it a little bit better.
No, exactly. Maybe jumping in, I'll kind of facilitate some of this so you don't have to worry too much about it. Maybe a question here is like, do you have a special tool or way in which you kind of recommend like handling OKRs or that kind of pulse of work that you do inside your team?
Yeah, to be honest, like there's so many tools out there. I mean, Product Board probably has a bunch of other tools that I'm not even aware of, which is awesome. But I think the biggest thing that I feel is try to meet where your stakeholders are. If everyone works in Google Sheets, work in Google Sheets, like make it easier for them. If a lot of people are working in Jira and you use that in terms of tracking initiatives and epics, because that's where your engineers are, find a way to work in Jira. We've had a lot of different tools we've used that was proposed from, I don't even know, Coda to all kinds of stuff that, it was proposed to use as a way to track metrics, but no one would actually get onboarded to use it, which defeats the point. So just try to meet users where they are and where they live already day to day. Even if it's not the best platform, they'll at least check it and review it.
Yeah, at least give you updates and provide stuff on that. What maybe just to follow up on that a little bit, it's like, is there like a cost and effort essentially involved in implementing OKRs? Is there like something you need to go through as a team that's you found has maybe helped get that motion off the ground and get started?
Yeah, a lot of it was how are we actually accomplishing our goals as a company? Are we meeting them or are we not, as a basic metric, in terms of whether it's for investors or stock price or whatever you've decided as a team? If you're accomplishing them and doing well, like, that's great. How can we do them better as a platform? Like, how can we improve that? Or if you're not, even more, be like, okay, this is an opportunity to change. Like, we're failing at what we accomplished and we're trying to do. How can we reset and really look at, okay, if these are our goals and these are still most important, how do we actually accomplish them? What are the steps to get there? And that's what's missing. And therefore we're not being successful.
Yeah. I mean, you shared some really good advice there too, of like bringing people back in when they're pushing back or being a counterpoint to something that you're thinking about doing, and like just trying to get at the root of like, so why are you pushing back? Why are you against this or pushing against it? There's a few questions in here of like, how do you deal with like the logic bully, or how do you deal with the person that's like that counterpoint, or where they don't want to do something they don't want to do? Maybe there was that resistance. Maybe just your thoughts on generally how to overcome that resistance in teams, and in particular, like how to set the tone and the stage of, I guess, being both a good listener to that feedback, and a good responder to it, while at the same time also setting like the standard of like what that should be looking like for your team.
Yeah, I mean, I've found for me personally, it's usually there's like kind of one core person that's leading the efforts on it. Like maybe a whole team doesn't agree with it, but trying to, if it's a whole team scenario, trying to resonate where they're coming from and understanding their key pain points and problems. For example, my team is having a really hard time working with another team because it's a lot of ad hoc requests that come in. We have to add them into our sprint. It kind of messes everything up. And so, we had a pretty big meeting with their leaders and our leaders. We're like, look, this isn't working. Whatever we're doing right now isn't working. How can we move forward? We're all in agreement. We're all frustrated. Let's just accept that. Now, how do we move forward? Here are some options we've come up with. We'd love to hear your suggestions. Where can we go forward? So just leveling and understanding where people are at. If it's one individual, I really try to take the time and meet with them one-on-one and be like, look, it sounds like you're very frustrated or you feel very absent about this one issue. Why? Can you tell me where this is coming from? Are there other things involved? Or is it just this issue and you're frustrated with this one feature or how it went down or one person you're working with? Where can we use that as a jumping off point? And really being very honest, be like, look, we can't do that. Or, I understand this is an issue for you, but we need to have a compromise. We can revisit this in the future so it doesn't happen again and get feedback on that. But like, this isn't the way that you're proposing it and frustrated by it isn't working and it's affecting the team morale, which is, anytime you kind of propose that to someone else, realizing that they're having a negative effect on a lot of other people, I think has worked really well in terms of overcoming that and figuring out a next step.
Yeah. Maybe the question here is like, as you're building a team, how do you tell if you're taking real steps to make the team a strong team versus maybe just doing fun things? How do you tell if your fun things maybe are even helping that team?
I will say, I think fun things are great. Like you should always have fun things. We kind of started that later. For my team, we were essentially trying to completely redesign a product that was archaic and awful, for lack of a better word. And so a lot of it was coming together and realizing that, okay, anything we do at this point is going to be way better than whatever we have. So understanding, what are we trying to accomplish? How can we all work together on coming up with solutions or giving feedback? If you have like one designer or one product lead who kind of needs to take the initiative, you can still get other people to lean in terms of feedback, pulse check, metrics, whatever, to kind of all rallying around the same goal. So really having something for all of you to just work on and drive forward together to start. And then you can kind of use that as an example for feedback, for improvements, or, it'd be great if we met every day to just regroup on what our status was, or it'd be really great if we broke this down into why don't you do that? That would be really helpful. Do you feel comfortable doing it? You want me to start it? How can I help you with that? So having something to work around to start is really helpful. You can still do all the fun things and all of that stuff too. But you will find as you just start working together that it'll be very obvious, especially for their team members, that like, oh, we need a set of expectations. We need a checklist for requirements for our code or whatever. Like it'll be very obvious and come up very quickly, and that will come in time.
Yeah, exactly. When you made a really good point in that answer too about the value of like delegation into your team and empowering your team to feel like participants in the conversation and discussion. I'm curious, like, how has that maybe helped you maybe deflect a little bit of like the load on yourself, but also, build that sense of team?
Yeah, I think, and that kind of goes actually back to like building that trust and what people's interests are. Anytime someone new comes in our team, what we do is have everyone on the team have a one-on-one with that person. And it doesn't have to be their first week because they're probably overwhelmed, but just scheduling like 20 minutes, usually kind of rotate per day with someone new, just to be like, this is a space to ask questions. If you don't have any questions, we can just talk and that's okay. And it's reserved. Or if you're overwhelmed, we can schedule it for the next day. So having those already blocked off pieces of time help a lot. And then I can really understand, okay, this person who's a developer and has a React background, but spent 5 years in commercial banking, like that is so helpful. He was so curious to learn about like the background of fraud and risk and how we make decisions and other things, like versus someone else on my team has a design background and consider themselves a designer, even though they're a developer, and really wanted to take a mindset of like, what is the branding? What do the icons look like had such a strong interest. And I was like, go for it. Allocate a small percentage of your time for this. But if you're passionate about it, we will follow whatever standard you want, which gives them the real freedom to be able to do the things they want to do. So just establishing that interest in what people want to do, what their strengths are, what they want to grow in. I mean, it kind of does the work itself, which is great.
Yeah, there was a great piece this week from the folks at Raw Signal Group about this, talking a little bit about the value of cross-training teams and team members, in particular in the context of what that opens up in terms of your ability to both find promotion and advancement opportunities, but also to retain and excite people in your team with, new energy and new things to focus on. So I think that's a great answer you provided there. I want to come to a question. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Really briefly is like, in terms of like skill sets and understanding people on your team, I think it's really helpful to be very honest that like you can't do everything and there's going to be people that come in. We have essentially an upskill list. So we have very, very senior developers, very junior developers. We just create a list. Okay, what are all the things in terms of troubleshooting issues, incidents, things that come up that we make sure that they are trained on or they have familiarity in, or one of them does. So no matter what, they are covered in case they are actually out. And that's been hugely helpful.
Yeah, massive. Coming from a question from Jack here that was in the chat is, how do you overcome having to spoon feed everything? It's like the creeping change of mentality over the years that everything needs to be really easy for a team member to take action. Otherwise it won't happen. For example, if it's a long article, it just takes time to read. But it seems to be more than just a slight unmotivated attitude. I don't know. Yeah, maybe some thoughts there you've got.
Yeah, so this is tough because I feel like, especially as a product person, like you do often have to spoon feed some individuals, usually executives, because they have limited time. And, they need to look at something and see if this is urgent. Do I need to answer this? Do I need to look into this? Like, what do you need from me? And making that very direct. When it comes to more team members and spoon feeding is, I look at it in two ways. One is, did they not necessarily investigate the problem enough in order to ask the questions that they need? Did you already provide this information for them, but maybe it wasn't in the format or as easy for them to obtain? Or is it on you in terms of, okay, what is the standard practice in terms of how you're giving information to them to be able to accomplish the project? Try to take a step back and be like, okay, is there access issues? Do they know who to reach out to? Have they done this before? Like really taking a step back and looking at that. If that's all the case, then it's definitely something that is worth approaching in terms of feedback. If it's more of a peer and like leader level, or if it's something you need to relay to their manager, that is up to you, depending on the org. But telling them, look, like you are an independent person. You can find out this information yourself. You have been given resources in the past of where to find this or looking it up or contacting the person. Why do we need to go back and forth again with the product lead asking for the same information again? So like I said, it depends on the context, depends on how you're delivering that information. It's always good to take a step back. I have been guilty of this where I sent a message to someone. I was like, oh, it wasn't clear at all what my question was in this. And you're just kind of like trying to get it out as quickly as possible, but just taking that 10 seconds of the intent of like, is it super clear what I'm asking and what I need for them in order for me to move forward instead of a back and forth?
Yeah, totally. Maybe a question here related more to decision making. It was in here. How do you make team decisions? Is it consensus, majority vote, a PM making the call? Is it something else? Like, how do you approach that challenge of decision making?
Yeah, I think for like, especially when it comes to like making decisions, like understanding who your key stakeholders are. We recently, like, I had something this morning very early that was like, okay, are we going to claim this as an incident or is this that big of a deal? And, I kind of took a minute and reread a lot of the information that was sent to me. And I was like, you know what? This doesn't have enough for me to necessarily take an action on this right now. I need to do more digging. I need to talk to a few other people on my team. I need to validate this is correct. I need to understand what the actual core of the problem is. And from a high level, kind of realized I feel that we are trying to solve the symptom, not the problem. So, you can, I'm sure a lot of people have heard this analogy of like, you can take lots of Tylenol and Advil if your back is hurting, or you could, maybe exercise more or see a physical therapist or try to fix the core of the problem instead of just fixing the symptom. So I think that's probably a good start. But I will say though, there's some scenarios, especially when it comes to product, that sometimes you just need someone to make the decision. And whether it's a good decision or a bad decision, you try to make the best decision based on the information you had. And you can always iterate, you can always pause, you can always go back and, you know what, that wasn't the best decision. This is what I learned from it. But I feel at the time, based on the information I had, we needed a way to move forward. And just waiting around for a decision is making a decision, unfortunately.
Yeah. One of the pieces I often see with teams on the decision side is that sort of one-way door versus two-way door decision too. And you made a great point there of the two-way door. We can always come back and we can iterate and we try this again. We may not have got it right. The one-way door decision needs all the inputs and the advice and the right context. And so taking that time in that moment, like you talked about, like your situation today, to gather that context can actually be a good moment. Just take a pause and step back and be ready for that. There's a few questions here about hiring. Should your first hire be a people manager or a worker? Another one of like, how do you sort of transition to that first hire from an outsourced team? Maybe some of your experiences on that side when you've been working.
Yeah. So I will say, especially in today's environment of hiring, it's great to just hire anyone because honestly, like you don't really have the ability to pick and choose if you could cherry pick. So I think if you can just hire someone on your team to get started, whether that's just a worker and you can assign them work to investigate, to look into, to know that they're like the first hire, they get to work on it first. That's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. If anything, it speeds things up to get the work done. But if you end up hiring a people manager, that's also great. You can establish a really strong relationship with that person, that trust. What does it look like? How do you want to model your team? You get to decide on hiring people together. For one of my teams, our people manager was hired almost last because it just took a long time to find someone. And it was fine. I mean, we made it work. I had, several people on my team we were just kind of all on the same level in terms of what we needed to get done. We made a lot of decisions together. And then once that person came in, it took some time in terms of trust and expectations to know people. But because I had already worked with a lot of the individuals for months, I could really onboard her and get her up to date and quickly, much faster versus if we had kind of started both at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. I know some people are probably going to start to jump in the next little bit here, but we'll wrap up with a couple more questions that are left, and then we can close things out. One question here from Mohit is, how do you build performing and self-organizing teams, especially in an accelerated fashion?
Yeah, so for this, like this kind of goes back to like the delegation and making sure that things, there's something that I've emphasized a lot with my team is like, there shouldn't be one person who does everything or only can do a few things. You really want to have the ability where as features, requests, needs come through, I'm generally like the first person to take a look just from a prioritization standpoint. But if I can't, or I'm out or whatever, like it's very clear who that line of triage is to. And so they can jump in. Like there's no dependency on my, like, there's, for example, this is kind of nitpicky, but like some people feel really strongly that PM should be the only one creating tickets, which frankly, I think is bullshit. Because, in many ways, it's like, if you're the one making all the tickets for all the work to do, you are a blocker and a bottleneck for a lot of people. Empower them to create their own. It's fine. You can send it, you can share it, you can look at it. Okay, what is the definition of done? How are we accomplish it? What are the, like, teach them to do that. Like, it's not that hard. And you can always give feedback later of like, hey, looks like there was some parts missing here. It wasn't really clear to me what this is actually accomplishing, but like, you're not a bottleneck and a barrier to them.
Yeah, totally. That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a trap.
Yeah, definitely completely a trap, right? Yeah, exactly. One last question here is maybe like around, I think what I was, I'm not going to take this particular example in full detail, but like, you got a particularly like interesting product idea, something you kind of see as an opportunity inside your product of where it can go. How do you get essentially other people on side to let you try this thing, to move forward, to find that room? Particularly I think is things like proofs of concept and some of that kind of stuff can be expensive for people to build, but also maybe take them off of the roadmap, plan, direction, and vision they set in that sort of step one that they've curated. How do you best move it forward on that side?
Yeah, I totally, it's tough. There's a really good, I don't know if they call it a prioritization framework, but Intercom does this. And essentially, as an organization, as product leads, whatever, let's assume you set out all of the initiatives that you want to accomplish in the next 3 to 6 months, let's say. And of all those things that you've set, you've reviewed the capacity, you've estimated them, you've figured out you're going to do them. This is the timeline. Great. 2 months in, another opportunity shows up for some random reason. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is great. The way that they have taken the approach, to what my team is also doing, is kind of more of a RICE approach, where you're saying, okay, all of these things we've already committed to, they're accomplishing these goals and metrics to impact to the larger team, the company OKRs. Is this new opportunity going to be more impactful than all the other things that we've already committed to? If yes, then we should go after it. Like, why not? Yeah. Or how can we slot this in, or do a very preliminary launch with it, or do some user research if users even want this, even though it seems like a great opportunity, just as a pulse check. It could be even something where you have a customer success team, you have a chat or an email, like ask a question at the end of asking like, hey, we're thinking of doing X, like, would you use it? Like, just see what people say, instead of organizing like a whole user research thing. It's like, it can just be simple. It's okay. And that's fine. And, I think it's tough too, because there's been features and things that I've worked on for months and months and months and months, and it's just on a shelf essentially until it becomes to be more important, or because the company realized that all the other competitors offer it except for us, or we realize we have a lot more data now to realize the impact and the cost of the company. And that's okay, but at least I have the documentation. I have it right now. It's ready to go. And sometimes like in a few weeks, another PM will be like, hey, I remember we talked a long time ago about that thing with someone with helping customers. Like, oh yeah, you mean this? I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you. That's so helpful. Like, no, awesome. Like, it takes some time to write it out, but like, you already have it documented, ready to go.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to take one last one, and that's from Utah here in town in Vancouver, where I live. How do you build teamwork, partnership with your executives? They are your boss. How do you avoid essentially being the yes person?
Yes, the yes person, so tough. Definitely understanding, I think, what's on their plate, really trying to resonate with them. I recently just had to meet with my boss, and I could tell there was just a lot going on. I was like, is there anything I can do to help you? And instead of just, these are the things that I need. Is there anything that can support you? The answer was no, but just asking is really helpful. In terms of actually that partnership, looking at, okay, what are they trying to accomplish? Is the things that I'm delivering enough for you to make decisions? Do you need more data? Do you need a more detailed view of the feature that I'm working on, or is this enough? Like, don't be afraid to directly ask that feedback. And as for the yes person, like, especially when they ask for things, don't hesitate to write back and be like, when do you need this by? Like, do you need this by end of day? Do you need this by tomorrow? I want to make sure I'm prioritizing correctly based on my other responsibilities. It's kind of a pulse check without saying yes right away, but being realistic of when they need that information.
Yep.
If it's ASAP, obviously it's ASAP. Like, and that's sometimes just what happens. But, you know, if there's something else comes across, it's okay to push back of like, well, I was thinking we should get into crypto or something else. Be like, that's a great idea. Is this more important than all these other things that I'm working on? And if that's the case, I'm happy to work on it. But we've already committed to these things. And I want to be really, really conscious of context switching. And if this is more important, I can do that. But if not, maybe let's look into it a little bit more and make sure this is the best decision for the company where the team is going.
Yeah. It's wisdom. Perfect wisdom. Thank you, Cara.
Yeah.
With that, I think we're just going to wrap things up.
Awesome.
I did share a link in the chat with everyone. We'd love to get your post-event feedback. We do share this with our speakers like Cara, and so do take a moment, fill out our survey. We also give away a little monthly prize and some stuff to people that do give away their feedback and share their thoughts on the events. So please do take a moment if you can. Also, if you want to continue the discussion, Cara is in our community. We'd be happy to create a post or ask additional questions inside there. We're always interested in creating some conversations with other people that are part of our community. We have lots of other great events coming up in the next little while. Just a few to kind of highlight. Chris Daniels speaking on September 8th on using Wordly Maps. We've got our product makers roundtable. These are actually little sessions where product managers can come all together and talk about the work we're doing and the challenges exactly like we're dealing with here, and bounce ideas off other people and get other people's feedback. We're doing that on September 14th. We've got JJ Rory coming in on September 15th to talk about the 5 immutable truths. And we've got our little book club on the 21st talking about Marty Kagan's Inspired and kind of wrapping that piece up. We've been reading it all summer as a group, so it should be kind of fun and engaging discussion there. And we've got Katja and Daniel coming in to talk a little bit about scalable leadership opportunities inside product, how to take that step from individual contributor to leadership, and how to map your course and direction on that side. Lots of ways to get involved in our community too. We've got a mentoring program that we've been running. We've got the first cohort out right now, with a new cohort starting in October. We've got our roundtables, as I talked about before. We've got our regular matching programs. You can have coffees and hookups virtually with people in the community. And again, also opportunities to talk and share your thoughts. I think there's probably people in this session today that have something that they can share about their craft of product and the work that they do and how they approach it. We'd love to hear from you if you're interested. Feel free to put up your hand and apply online for that. It would be great to have you. With that, thank you very much for joining us, everyone. It was really great to see you. Enjoy the rest of your summer as we take a little break over the month of August on our events, and we'll see you back in September, and with a busy schedule this fall as well, with lots of great speakers and topics being covered. Thanks again, Cara, for the fantastic session as well, and I hope you enjoyed the experience and had a good day.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thank you everyone for attending.